It's my pleasure tonight to introduce tonight's speaker. Marcus Miller is a conservation technician from the North Platte Fish Hatchery for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. Marcus grew up just a few miles away from the hatchery. He loves to hunt and fish. He has a Bachelor of Science degree from UNL, majoring in fisheries, ecology, and management, and minoring in water science. He has worked for the commission for 6 years, and tonight he's going to talk about walleye spawn. We'll take questions after the presentation, but Marcus, take it away.
All righty, thanks, Mark. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to share my screen and get stuff pulled up, and hopefully we can get this to work. All right. So yeah, as Mark said with his introduction, my name is Marcus, out of the North Platte Fish Hatchery in North Platte, Nebraska. One of a handful of people that are working out there right now currently. And what we're going to talk about tonight is the Nebraska walleye spawn. You know, walleyes, as far as when it comes to fisheries or on the fishery side of things for anglers and stuff, are pretty sought after species. It's about our biggest endeavor every year is going and spawning these fish. So yeah, we'll kind of take a dive in and kind of see the process and how stuff kind of works when we go and do a walleye spawn. And I will let you know there's quite a few video clips. Just gonna preface with the fact that this was kind of our baby the last couple of years, was getting some video clips put together and in the end a full-length video, just to kind of get our information out to you guys, everybody in the public, people that are interested, other states that might be interested in what we do and how we do it. So yeah, if you have any comments about that side of stuff too, on maybe something that you feel could be explained or done a little bit better, or certain things like that, please don't hesitate to let us know, because this is just kind of our kickoff, and we went big and went for the walleye spawn right away. And if this all works and people seem to enjoy it, we have future plans to continue doing a lot more of these videos and clips and stuff to get out to the public. So yeah, with that, let's get into Nebraska's walleye spawn. So I just want to start off here real quick. I know graph and percent eye up and stuff isn't exactly something that people aren't going to know off the top of their head, but how we kind of measure our success, or you know, if we're improving on what we're doing, or kind of our benchmark sort of metric, is our percent eye up. And all that's referring to is the number of eggs that we take from the fish that actually become fertilized and mature to the point that they actually get eyes. So one of the first things you'll see develop in fish eggs usually are their eyes. It'll cause a color change and kind of ensures that we know that they're viable, good eggs. So that's kind of our metric is percent eye up. But right here, just off the bat, I don't know if you're familiar, our main 3 reservoirs that we go to do this walleye spawn, Sherman Reservoir, Merritt Reservoir, and then of course our big one, Lake McConaughy. Basically that comes down to just manpower, also some historical stuff as far as that's kind of where it's always been done, and also the quality of fish and the quality of eggs we can get from those places. So that's kind of why you see, you know, that's pretty much, there might be a year where a Harlan gets thrown in, Harlan County gets thrown in or something like that. But for the most part, especially with what we're going to talk about, we're basically referring to Sherman, Merritt, and Lake McConaughy. So you can see on the graph here, since 2009, kind of our percent IUPs, or what we would consider successful fertilization of the eggs, good eggs. Our goal is kind of that 70%. And for the most part, we've hung right around that 70%. There's obviously dips and years that are better and years that are worse. A lot of that comes down to environmental conditions when we're doing it. Lake McConaughy, obviously, people love it. It's got a lot of beach most of the time. It's not so fun to spawn walleye when the wind's blowing 50 and you're standing on the beach and the sand's hitting you in the face, and yeah, it's a tough go. So there's some reasons behind, why maybe we aren't quite up to par every year with some of those, but yeah, for the most part, we've kind of been hanging around that 70%, which is what we shoot for. So like I said, Sherman Reservoir, Lake McConaughy, and Merritt Reservoir. We're going to highlight a lot on Merritt Reservoir just during my presentation here, mainly because that's where our video footage is shot. So they were able to come up, take our video footage, put all these clips together for everyone to see. So that's one reason. The other reason is, as you can see on the left picture there, we actually have a new building we put up at Merritt Reservoir specifically for walleye spawning. Lake McConaughy, like I said, we do it out on the sand, sometimes on a dock if we can get somebody to let us, or, depending on where it is. Sherman is at the marina on the docks. So to have a building is a game changer. So that's kind of what we want to highlight here. Get you out of the elements. As you can see, there's even a little snow on the ground in that picture on the left. So it's nice for us to at least be able to maybe have a heater on or get out of the wind, or the last couple of years, it seemed to be more of a get out of the sun. So yeah, that's just kind of keep that in mind, that this is kind of a big improvement for us. So the very first thing we're going to start off with, though, to spawn walleyes, obviously you have to have male and female fish. So the big portion or big ticket item here is collecting ripe females. Most of this is done using gill nets, which we'll get into here. There is a little bit of electrofishing involved in female collection, but that's kind of a certain case scenario situations. So yeah, most of it, like I said, is all gill nets, and we will talk a little bit about the gill nets here coming up. But as you can see, just a couple of quick pictures, just looking at the walleyes, the big females we're after. So we're looking for ones with big plump bellies that give lots of eggs. And there's a good picture of that right there in a live well on a boat. So lots of females, that's what we want. So real quick, before we get into this first video, just talking about gill nets for anybody that's not familiar with what a gill net is. It's basically, if you think of it as curtains in your house or something similar to that, there's a float line on top. It's attached to buoys. And then from that float line hangs this curtain that's approximately 6 foot in depth. So if you can think of this 300-foot long, 6 foot tall curtain, that's kind of what you're looking at. The bottom of the net then has weights in order to keep it sort of fanned out or spread out. So the top is floating, the bottom has weights, it keeps it nice and stretched. So we get that full 6 foot kind of section of that water column covered in order to make contact with the fish. Most of the time we're setting our nets right in that 6 to 10 foot. So we're basically covering the whole water column. Walleyes are a bottom oriented fish for the most part, and especially when they're spawning, they're looking for rocky substrate. They're hanging out kind of right there on the bottom. So 6 to 10 foot is about what we're looking at. Also, we're doing this at night. Walleyes are pretty well equipped to be nocturnal, really big eyes, huge photoreceptors. So they're kind of active in that dusk or nighttime. So a lot of times they'll move up then shallow at night. And that's kind of when we can contact them the easiest. Usually, again, this is kind of stemming back to Merritt. Usually there's 4 to 12 nets set there. Again, that just kind of depends on our egg needs. We obviously don't want to go out and contact a bunch of fish and stress fish if we don't have to. So yeah, we set the nets. They're usually left to soak for a couple hours, and that's it, because we want the fish good and healthy when they're coming out of the net. So I believe with that, we will kind of see the process of setting those gill nets, looking at gill nets, kind of how we do it from the boat here at Merritt. Yeah, so pretty self-explanatory, I guess. I mean, we're literally taking the nets right off the front of the boat and plopping them into the water. That's that, and the nets kind of do their thing. So after we set the nets, obviously, just like I said, let them soak for a couple hours, and then we are right back into the boat, kind of usually as soon as dark hits. And then it's time to go run the nets or start catching fish. So basically what you're going to see coming up in this next clip is we're looking for our buoys at night. So everything's done at night. So there's just a tinge of extra difficulty. But you're getting on the downwind side, you're hooking the net with a net hook, and you got manpower after that, just two guys pulling the net in. Fish are going to come up over the sides. Once they come up, immediately we are right onto the fish, picking them easily out of the net. Most of the time, we actually cut our nets just to eliminate the stress of the monofilament netting on their gills, and running the risk of actually stripping eggs out if one was ripe. So everything's done very quickly, but with a purpose and with care, is kind of the point of this. We want to make sure that the fish that we're catching are making it back to where they need to go, to our spawning shack, good and healthy, and ready to give viable eggs. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to see here. And like I said, keep in mind, this is all done at night. A lot of people ask, we never see the process, or you don't see it go on, or they might see us there just for a little bit during the day. And this is why most of the time we, for a couple weeks in April, we sleep during the day. So night time's our time. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of running the nets. There again, I know it's kind of self-explanatory, and especially after you see it, it's pretty obvious. But like I said, one thing that we really stress on is making sure those fish are healthy when we catch them. Obviously, getting tangled in a gill net wouldn't be fun for us. It's not fun for the fish, but at the same time, we're doing our best that we get out there. The nets are ran swiftly, kind of with purpose, getting them out of the net, getting them in a tank with oxygen, and then getting them into our holding cribs where they're good to go. So yeah, that's kind of the basis of actually collecting those females. The other method of collecting fish that we use is electrofishing. For the most part, the electrofishing is used mainly to collect our male walleye. Part of the reason for that being is our gill nets are actually, they're a 3-inch mesh. So each hole in our gill net is 3 inches. So those are actually selecting for larger fish. In this case, the larger fish being the female that we're after. So catching our males, you're not contacting sort of that sweet spot of a 12 to 19-inch male fish, which is kind of what we're looking for. Some of the big older males, their milk just isn't as viable. Every now and again, you'll come into contact with some, they won't give as much, or like I said, it's just not viable. So that's part of the reason. The other reason is just efficiency as well. We're able to do this for the most part in the daytime. A lot of times the males stay up shallower. They're hanging out, they're easy to catch just by electrofishing. So it's something that we're able to go do kind of while we sit and wait, or kind of holding for that nighttime female net running. So that's kind of the other reason too. We have actually started doing quite a bit of electrofishing at Lake McConaughy for both our males and our females. There's nothing scientific behind sort of our theory, but Lake McConaughy, I don't know if anybody's ever seen any pictures, but the people that fish the dam on Lake McConaughy is pretty incredible. The amount of anglers it receives at night on the dam and trying to catch some of these big fish, which is great. But what we noticed is we're actually able to catch more females electrofishing during the day. And we believe that could be partially due just to angling pressure. They've actually pressured them into becoming more receptive to spawn during the daytime, which is something, like I said, it's not scientific by any means, but it's just something we've noticed. So electrofishing, like I said, most of the time males, certain cases, specifically Lake McConaughy, where we have used it for females. But this is kind of a cool clip. You can kind of see the fish once the electricity comes in and stuns them. You'll see it kind of circle track towards this electrode here hanging off the boat. We can dip them. One thing to kind of keep in mind too, the electrofishing, it's a quick pulse of electricity, and it stuns them momentarily. Once we get them scooped and back into the live well with oxygen on the boat, it's usually less than a minute. They're back upright, doing their thing, completely good to go. So it's pretty harmless, but it's effective. So yeah, as you could kind of see in the video, most of those fish were smaller than what you were seeing coming out of the nets. And that's just, like I said, due to the fact that those are, for the most part, males that we're catching. The males tend to be smaller. But yeah, and for anybody that's interested, just kind of a quick blurb to this as far as how electrofishing actually works. So the boom that sort of had all the tentacles hanging off of it actually works as our anode. And the hull of the boat, you can see it's an aluminum boat, works as our cathode. So it doesn't really make any sense as far as how you can stand on it and not get electrified, but it works. So yeah, so once we have our males, we obviously have to collect milk from them. Milt is just the term for the male fish's gametes, male sperm. And basically how you're going to see how we do this is we use sort of what we came up with, for lack of a better term, it's an aspirator. And we're able to actually keep these fish completely dry, and under our own power, sort of compress their abdomen, get them to expel their milt, and actually collect it into a jar is kind of the long and the short of it. One thing I do want to add here is we try to keep everything extremely dry, which I know that seems kind of counterintuitive. Fish live in water. They're always in water. They're wet. But the actual milt and eggs in this instance, the gametes, they activate once that drop of water or once they become contaminated with water. So what we're trying to do is collect the milt as purely as possible in its dormant state so that it's not active. So that way, when we're ready to actually fertilize the eggs, then we can control when that activates to get the best fertilization. So yeah, this kind of big no-no is the old days. It was basically a female's eggs in the pan, and then you came and squeezed the male right into the pan, and that was how you did it. Those days are kind of over. This is sort of the not so much new anymore, but the improved way. So this is just kind of a picture of that aspirator I was referring to. It's essentially just a straw device that you're creating a vacuum. Just like if you were drinking out of a fountain drink or something from the gas station, the only difference is, we just create the vacuum there in the flask or in the test tube, and it actually collects that milt just based off your ability to suck a straw. And here again, just another picture showing. So when we're actually, this is in the spawning shack, and when we're actually doing it, we collect the milt and then divvy it up into test tubes. That way, when we have our pan of eggs, we're ready to go. It's just one test tube into the pan of eggs, and we can kind of fly through it, kind of get a little rhythm going. But another thing that is going to be a part of this milt collection is we add milt extender to the milt, and all that is a sugar and salt solution. So we're taking 1 milliliter of milt, adding it with 2 milliliters of milt extender. It sort of kind of matures the milt a little bit, and obviously does what its name implies, allows what milt we have to sort of be extended out over a lot of eggs. If we had to collect 1 male fish for every female we would be there forever. So this allows us to use 1 male, maybe then fertilize, 5-ish, let's go with 5 for the most part, 5 females. That's usually kind of what goes into our process on that. So that way, we're cutting down our time or our work effort in order to do this. So so there you have it. That's milk collection. Like I said, just to kind of reiterate, we're keeping everything dry. We want that milk pure. And so that's why you see so much care and why we're trying to collect that immediately after it leaves that male. Yeah, so now we're gonna have some footage. So once those females were caught, they were actually brought back in front of that spawning shack. I don't know if you can remember that picture, but you've seen all these T-posts and nets kind of hanging out into the bay. That just gives us a spot to, once we collect our females, we can put them, they stay in their own body of water. We can put them in these holding pens or holding cribs that we call them. That way we can sort through them, pick out the ones that are ripe, ready to expel eggs, and then keep sorting through the fish that weren't ready yet in the following days. So it just kind of keeps our production high. Yeah, like I said, so the females that are ready to express eggs, we consider those to be ripe. And those are the fish we want. They're usually, a light press on their abdomen, and they'll expel their eggs very quickly. And so that's what we want. Those eggs are usually the viable, good eggs that are ready for fertilization. This video is going to show these holding pens, but you can kind of get a feel of just how many fish we're talking about on a scale of what we're doing here. So yeah, you could see those guys just sorting through, checking for ripeness. Anything that's green was getting moved down in the cribs, and then anything that was ready to spawn that day went into this crib that's behind these guys here. So now we're going to get into the actual spawning of the females, or the egg take, so to speak, from the females. Here again, kind of the same thing that I talked about with the males. We're keeping these females extremely dry. We don't want any drop of water, none of that, going in and contaminating our pan. And also we've made a switch. See here in the right picture, it sort of just kind of looks like a mixing bowl that you'd have at home. We actually made a switch. You can see it doesn't have a lot of surface area on the bottom. So what we were finding was eggs were actually piling up deeper. And then we switched to just essentially a mineral pan, or something you'd find at Tractor Supply. I mean, this stuff is not overly scientific by any means. They're just like almost a water pan. There in the left picture, you can see, and it has they're wider, bigger, flatter bottomed. And what that allows us to do is keep our egg mass actually shallower, in order to get more exposure or surface area contact when we go to fertilize with the mill. So that's kind of all that's highlighting, just some of the changes we made over the years learning. Yeah, so like I said, our ripe females that got sorted off, they're transferred up in small batches, usually 5 to 6 is kind of what we go at a time. And we're taking them up in a tank of water, up to that spawning shack. And then from there, they are carefully grabbed, and with their vent covered. That's a huge sort of thing you see when people, maybe hadn't done it before, or just kind of get complacent and don't think about. You actually pick some of these fish up, and within seconds, they can just expel their eggs. And obviously we want those. So yeah, we were making sure we're covering the vent, and then you'll actually see there's a person there standing with a towel and drying them off. And all this is happening right before they go on to what we call the horse. All it is just, the guy sitting there, he's got something to sit on. It's a stool to sit on that holds our pan, so that you can easily take those eggs and get them in the pan. So that's kind of what you'll see in this next video. So yeah, that's the actual what we refer to as the spawning of the female. A lot of people make the joke, they think it maybe looks like applesauce or tapioca pudding. We get that quite a bit, but like I said, there again, you could see that vent was covered. Then they went and were able to dry it off completely with a towel, and then right onto the horse. And then all it is just a compression of that abdomen, and expelling those eggs into that pan. So yeah, from that point, now we're ready to fertilize. So we've already collected our males, we've collected our milk, we've spawned the female. So now it's time to add the two together and actually fertilize the eggs. So again, in this video clip, what you're going to see kind of the steps here. If you go from left to right on the pictures, our first step is adding that milk. And once that milk is added to the eggs, we really kind of want to hurry, add water. Like I said, that water is what activates. So we want to make sure we get that water in now. And now we're going to go ahead and activate that milk, activate the gametes. We're ready for fertilization to happen. And as soon as that water is added, we want to make sure and we stir those eggs. We want everything to have a chance, kind of in a big homogeneous solution to have a chance to be fertilized. That's kind of our end goal. We want to produce as many fish as we can in the hatchery using the least amount of fish, and in a time frame that's attainable. So our goal is to make sure every one of these eggs gets fertilized. Obviously it doesn't. Obviously we're looking for that 70%, but that's kind of our goal. Just a quick side note, I guess I went away from the picture, but being since this is the Audubon Society, I don't know if anybody noticed the feather that we were stirring with. It's actually a turkey feather. We found that turkey feathers, they're soft enough that they don't break the eggs, but they still maintain their rigidity, so allow us to stir. So that's kind of a cool side note that everybody asks, well, why a turkey feather? Well, that's just kind of why. We've tried other feathers from other birds, and either they break the eggs or they sort of lose that stiffness and you can't stir with them. And for some reason, a turkey is just, that's the one that works. So just kind of a cool side note. But yeah, just what we talked about here. We're using a single test tube. We're adding that to the pan of eggs. We're activating it. We're stirring it, and we're ready to make walleye. So. Yeah, you can see the water's going in and he's right to the feather, stirring and getting it going. So that's the fertilization process right there. It's pretty quick. The milt's only active roughly for about 45 to 90 seconds. At least that's what we consider our active window. I'm sure, if you put it under a microscope and looked, which we have, it is active longer than that potentially, but not to its full potency. So kind of that 45 to 90 seconds is really the sweet spot. So that's kind of how long it's stirred. Once they're stirred, we're going to go on here and go into mucking. So walleye eggs in the wild, they actually have an adhesive coating that they develop as soon as they become exposed to water. And the reason for that being is they want their eggs to stick to the rocks and the gravel and those sort of things. That way, their eggs aren't washing up on the dam or up on the shore. They want them to stick where they're going to get oxygenated and be able to develop and then eventually hatch. In the hatchery system, we don't want sticky eggs. That's bad for us. We're actually going to put these into a jar, and we refer to it as clumping when they're sticky. And we're not able to get our water flow to them and actually be able to get gas exchange or for them to be able to take up oxygen. So sticking eggs is bad for us. So what we use is what we call muck. And all it is basically is a cosmetic grade clay, and it's mixed with water. So we just create that muck. Here again, it's kind of the same show as the fertilizing. After they're fertilized, the muck goes in for about 45 seconds and is stirred, ensuring those eggs are good and coated with that clay. And then they're going to go into a jar. Again, stirred with the turkey feather. So yeah, now we got our eggs fertilized, and they've been mucked, so they shouldn't be sticky anymore. And now we're gonna go ahead and take that muck right off. Like I said, it's just a quick deal. We just want to make sure those eggs get coated. And after that, we're ready for that to be off. We want good, clean water coming to them right out of the reservoir where we're at. So the temperature is the same. They're getting good oxygen. And we're ready to kind of refer to what we do is just cleaning them up. So what's going to happen, actually, let me back up one here. What's going to happen is once we get this jar out of the pan or into the jar onto what we call this hatching battery. So this picture on the right, you can kind of see our jars stacked up there, and they all have little tubes. That's actually our water inflow. And what you're going to see is water being added, and it creates sort of this upwelling, similar to like what you would see like in a lava lamp. You're creating this upwelling from the bottom, getting the eggs sort of rolled, getting all this stuff off, whether that be muck or sometimes there's some blood clots, there's bugs. We want to get all that stuff off, and make sure those eggs are getting oxygen. Also, sort of when this process is happening, the eggs are hardening, and when we refer to as hardening, they're actually swelling, and a lot of times they'll swell up to 2.5 times their original size when they come out of the fish itself. So we can't pack the jars all the way to the top. So what you'll kind of see there, if we did that, they would swell and overflow and dump out onto the floor. So that's sort of kind of why you see a quote unquote half full jar. That's kind of our max. So yeah, there's kind of a better still of what we refer to as the hatching battery. That tank on the top is just our head tank. It's filled with a pump from the reservoir right outside where we got our fish from. And then, yeah, we can line up a whole bunch of jars and get going with a lot of eggs at once. Just kind of as a sort of thought in the back of your mind. For the most part, somewhere's around 3 quarts. There'll be a better picture of this later, but 3 quarts in a jar. So 3 quarts of eggs per jar. And roughly in a walleye, roughly 1 quart of eggs is right around anywhere from 120 to 130,000 eggs. So if you can think about that, we're looking at 3 quarts per 1 jar of eggs, that's close to 400,000 eggs just in that 1 jar. And we've got all these jars lined up. So just kind of a thought you're able to maybe envision, kind of get the big scoop of the scale of what's going on. So So yeah, you can kind of see those good eggs rolling around and getting that muck off and starting their hardening process. This is a quick little clip, just kind of a funny jab in our sides. It's a sped up version. You can kind of see the whole process in motion. So you're going to see the fish come in from the right side of the screen there under the garage door. And then you can kind of put the pieces together with how we've talked about the females are getting spawned right here on the horse. Then they're going to go up to the table there towards the top of the screen at the red cooler and become fertilized. And then go down to the next guy standing to his right, get their muck. And then obviously go on to that hatching battery that's sitting behind the two guys at the table. So just kind of a quick little, you can kind of see it all happening at once. Yeah, so kind of funny, little humor. You got to throw a little humor in there, take a jab at all of us. But yeah, I mean, really though, it's a good clip that shows you, kind of the whole process all in one shot. So yeah, so after we get them spawned, they've hardened, they went through their whole deal that we can do with them at the lake. We've got to get them back to a hatchery. All this time that we've been talking about this is still happening in that spawning shack there at the lake. So in order to make more room at our spawning shack and start and getting these eggs back to hatch, we've got to get them back to the hatchery. And here again, not real scientific-y. They get transported in 100-quart coolers. So you can see that picture on the right. Jars go in, we dump them in, they're in the cooler. We duct tape the ever living Lord out of the cooler so that they don't spill, please. And we throw them in the back of a pickup and they head to their respective hatcheries. So yeah, like I said, it's just kind of, a little archaic, but it works. So they don't really require much oxygen as far as the actual eggs. So we're not worried about making sure there's oxygen stones. We just make sure that cooler's got plenty of water in it above the eggs. And for the most part, that'll, get them by. We've sent eggs to Oklahoma. We sent some eggs to Colorado, and we've never once added oxygen. I mean, they make it just fine and with the oxygen that's in the water that's in the cooler. So yeah, and during the transport, so obviously we need to know sort of how many eggs we're taking, right? We get a request every year for every lake and how many walleyes they want for that lake. So we need to kind of join our how much we're spawning to what we have requested. And basically all we're doing is going off an egg volume. And we call that our green egg volume, or our total number of green eggs. And you could see there was graduated lines on those jars. That's just pre-measured lines that we can kind of eyeball, get a good idea of what we got so that we know when we get back to the hatchery, we're going to be somewhere around that number that we needed. So yeah, now we have a hatching battery at the hatchery. Looks awfully similar to the one there in the spawning shack, but a little bit bigger. We can hold a lot more eggs on it. And this one actually is at North Platte. And this one here is a series of 3 that we have in this building. We have another half one in another building, but this is kind of what you'll see at most of our hatcheries that are raising or hatching our fish, are these hatching batteries. You'll see kind of those eggs settling out so that we can get a good read on those graduated lines on the jars. So yeah, there was a lot that just happened in that clip. I understand that. But basically, what you've seen is after those eggs made it back to the hatchery. And I don't know if anybody caught that, but I was just telling you how we brought them in 100-quart coolers and they showed up in a little cardboard box, right? We had a bit of a whoopsie on our filming and forgot to film that part, but we had muskie eggs come in. So don't get confused, but those were muskie eggs. Those were not our walleye eggs, but the rest of them that you've seen after that were all of our walleye eggs, those kind of yellow banana walleye eggs. And then what you saw is actually, us going through and enumerating those eggs. So you saw him taking measurements on the jar. You saw the counters with his fingers, and the pictures under the microscope. That was just us going through and taking small volumes of eggs and sort of enumerating them to what we consider to be good or bad eggs, getting a percentage, and then extrapolating that out to all of our jars to really knock down and get a number pinned down of what we have as far as eggs. Then there towards the end, obviously you saw the fry. The eggs hatch off that hatching battery. We're able to collect them. They come straight out of the jars. So the same jar that they were in through this whole video at the end is actually where they hatch. They come up out of the jars. We collect them in big circular tanks, sort of what you see behind the guys right now. And from there, a lot of them get stocked right away. So that's what these guys are doing here just at the end of this clip is they're actually in fry boxes is what we call them. And they're putting fish in, and these fish are actually getting ready to go to a lake, whether it be Branched Oak or Lake McConaughy or any of those. Yeah, that's how a lot of them get stocked. The ones that don't get stocked here right as fry will actually get stocked into our hatchery ponds. And those are the ones that then, of course, we feed and grow to a bigger size to be stocked later on, whether it's at a fingerling stage, which is kind of around that 1 to 2 inches, or an advanced fingerling, which we will be stocking here within the next month or so, a little over a month. And those should be closer, to sort of that 5-inch range. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of how it goes. And then there's our end product. We started with these big females and males and went through the whole process. And obviously got right down to the bitter end when they're going in a fry box and going right back into one of these lakes to hopefully grow up so they can become parents of offspring of walleye in the state of Nebraska. So yeah, that's really kind of the deal. Like I said, I know it's a lot of information, a lot of stuff thrown at you if you're not familiar with it. But yeah, there's a couple things, these guys, whether it was our communications team or our education team, these people here that are on the screen right now helped us a lot with the video clips. So yeah, I just wanted to give a special thanks to them. And with that, I believe that's probably the end of my program. If anybody has any questions, I will be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. I'll go ahead and do questions. You did say you have about 70% fertilization rate. Is that right?
That's what we shoot for. Yep, that's kind of our target mark is that 70%.
Okay. And then I see that Oscar had asked about the water temperature, and Chase said it was around low 40s you're working in out there.
Yep. Low 40s usually is kind of the sort of sweet spot when it comes to, a lot of the walleyes are triggered by water temperature as far as when it's time to spawn. So we're catching them when they're naturally spawning.
Okay.
And that 40 to 45 is about the water temp.
Okay. And then Oscar asked about how you milk a muskie, and wouldn't that be kind of dangerous? And Chase responded that you do use an anesthetic. So that's good, that sometimes you have to have a little help.
Yeah, we do. Those things are tough to handle. So yeah, they're anesthetized and put under for a little bit so that we're able to do our job and try to limit how much we actually hurt them, because most of the time they end up whooping us. So
okay. If anyone else has a question, go ahead and raise your hand or stick it in the chat box, or go ahead and unmic yourself or unmute yourself and just speak up now, maybe.
You said you send it to other states too? And how many places in Nebraska? I was wondering.
So I would have to look on our actual request, but In the state here in the state of Nebraska, it's basically from one end to the other. Just as an example, a couple off the top of my head: Lewis and Clark, Branched Oak, Harlan County, Lake Mac, Lake Maloney, Sutherland, Elwood, Johnson, Box Butte, Calamus. I mean, sort of all of those bigger reservoirs that are going to be able to support a fishery for walleye. So all across the state of Nebraska, the ones that we send to other states are usually on trades. So for instance, the ones we send to Colorado are actually just paying them back for some early eggs that we get from them. So they do their spawn a little bit earlier than we do in the state of Colorado. And we found that stocking some fish earlier in our Harlan County reservoir has worked better for that reservoir. It's a little farther south for some reason that they seem to work a little bit better. So what we're doing is getting, usually, I think last year it was, oh shoot, Chase might remember more right on, but I think it was around 10 million that we got from the state of Colorado early before our spawn. And then the ones we sent to Colorado were just 10 million in return back to them. Some of our other stuff, we do make some sawguy, which is a cross between a walleye and a sauger. They're the same, sort of family or same species of fish, for lack of a better term. They're kind of a subspecies, but we use female walleye and male sauger and create a sawguy. We do send some of those fish to places like Oklahoma. They're not able to spawn those fish, so a lot of times we'll have a trade with them on another type of fish or something. We can trade with them just so they can get their sawguy. They've had big success in some of their reservoirs with that. So yeah, like I said, the stuff you're seeing go out of state isn't necessarily us just giving stuff away. It's usually on trades.
Okay, Mark, you had a question about any trouble recruiting the assistants to get all that propagation done. I assume you get people from the hatcheries in different places in the state when you're real busy.
Yeah, we do. The main thing about it is most of us that are out doing this, we kind of like to see big fish and play with big fish and handle big fish. So it's usually not very hard to get a lot of people that want to come do it. It is really cool. I mean, if you like to fish, if you're a fisherman, or if you just like hanging out at the water and seeing fish, it's kind of a sight to see. I mean, 10, 12 pound walleye by the hundreds is pretty cool to see. So yeah, it's usually not much of a task to get people to volunteer and come check it out.
Okay.
And usually, adding on to that, I don't know. Usually we have management guys come out. Usually the management biologist guys, they'll help out with the actual brood selection or collection. And then the hatchery guys will come in during the day and do all the spawning. So it's kind of split up like that.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody can just speak up. Tim Knott, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I have two questions. One is, what are the minimum depths of a lake that you need to have to get a good maturing crop of walleye?
So yeah, so minimum depth just to have a walleye population is that what you're kind of going for?
Yeah.
So it kind of depends. It really does. And I know that's kind of broad, but there's some sandhill lakes even in our state that are maximum 6-8 foot deep that walleye or sawguy do wonderful in. And a lot of that is just because of the water supply that they're getting. A lot of those natural lakes tend to see, a bit more oxygen when they need it. Then obviously a lot of them can veg up or get nutrient loads that then cause big drops in oxygen. So it really kind of depends on the makeup of the lake. If you have a lake that's a nice rock hard sand bottom, maybe not a lot of vegetation, maybe that's a little bit murkier, I can't speak my words, murkier or turbid. It's not getting a bunch of light penetration. walleyes actually might do pretty well in that lake. You look at lakes like the South Dakota glacial lakes region, right? They have wonderful walleye fisheries. And there again, it just comes down to water temperature. Obviously, their water temperature stays a little colder. They're in the northeastern part of South Dakota. So it retains its oxygen levels a bit more. The walleyes are a bit happier. Our water seems to be getting hotter every year. That's kind of the trend we're kind of on right now. Summers are getting tough. So a lot of our shallow lakes, they're not going to have that cool water refuge with oxygen that are going to support walleyes. So it really is just kind of case dependent. But for the most part in our state, our bigger reservoirs are where you're gonna find them that are going to really support a good population, a catchable population.
Dwayne, I
Also,
think you had a question. Oh, go ahead, Tim. You had a second question.
yeah, how long does it take for most of the walleye to reach a catchable size?
Yeah, sure. So basically anywhere you go in the state, we have a minimum size limit of 15 inches. That's just kind of a good rule of thumb. And for the most part, in a really productive lake that maybe has a lot of bugs, a lot of zooplankton, a lot of bait fish then eating on that stuff, within a couple of years, those fish can be to 15 inches. There again, on the flip side of that, if you've got a lake maybe that doesn't have as much zooplankton, not enough stuff for them to eat when they're little, and then obviously in turn not enough stuff for their food to eat, it could take longer. It could take upwards 3 to 4 years. But a good rule of thumb, at least in our state for our reservoirs, kind of that 2 to 3 years for the most part. You're gonna be there.
Okay, Dwayne, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how much the oxygen level varies from the lake to lake for the lakes that you do the spawning.
Sure. Yeah. For the most part, as far as when we're talking about the lakes that we actually go to spawn, we're looking at Sherman, Lake McConaughy, Merritt. Our oxygen levels are pretty locked down. They're all really good fisheries. They all experience, good water level at the time when we're doing it in the springtime. So our oxygen's doing well. I don't know if we've ever truly measured it out in the reservoir, but I can tell you that our oxygen, as far as on our hatching batteries, sits close to that 100% saturation. So
that was one thing I was kind of wondering is if you needed that oxygenation at the time of fertilization.
Sure.
That you might need to check it then and possibly even add some oxygen.
Yep. No, 100%. It's definitely required at fertilization. Those gametes need oxygen. That's just kind of how it rolls. Yeah, I mean, like I said, 100% saturation is usually what we see on our hatching battery. I don't know if anybody's really ever taken it out in the lake, just because we've never had problems there in the shack spawning. But yeah, 100% saturation is kind of what we sit around.
So you don't have to worry about algae and things like that so much in the bigger lakes?
We do, but when we're doing this is in the springtime when the water temperature is still cold. A lot of those plants and aquatic veg haven't really grown up and had their chance to do that sort of thing. So no, we don't have to fight that.
Marcus, someone asked what the next fish that you start spawning with, or in the sequence, is walleye kind of the first species in the spring that you start with? Is there something before it, or what kind of is the next species you work with after the walleye?
Sure. Yeah. So no, walleye are actually a couple species down as far as the chain of events that goes on. Usually we start with our northern pike and our sauger spawning. We seem to be able to catch them and they spawn a little bit cooler water temps. The sauger, it's just sort of when we can get it done, and that's kind of where they fall in, and they're in our canal systems. So there again, they might experience a bit of a warm up in that canal a little sooner than some of our bigger reservoirs. But it pretty much goes northern pike, sauger, walleye, and then we move on to our sort of your white bass, your that sort of crappie is another one. At at North Platte anyway. The other ones we do actually spawn at some of our other facilities would be like yellow perch. That's kind of right in there all at the same time of walleye or right around that time frame, just towards the end of it, kind of right after. Largemouth bass is another one at another facility that's kind of a later on after walleye. So kind of facility dependent as far as what comes next. But for us, it's usually white bass, crappie, that sort of thing.
Okay. Someone asked what the weirdest thing you caught in your nets, and I see Chase put in there, you caught a deer stand once, and lots of lures. So is there anything else you can think of that's strange that you've come up with in your nets?
That pretty much sums it up. The deer stand was an interesting one for sure. And the lures, that's at night when you're pulling nets in, you got to really pay attention when you go to grab the net, because you might end up with a big treble hook in your hand if you're not paying attention. So
Yeah, and my roommate just reminded me a couple years ago when we were running sauger nets, we actually caught a pig skull through the
Okay.
canal system. It was odd to see, but yeah, you never really know what you're gonna catch.
Dwayne, you have a question?
One other one. I just heard recently that they're killing one of the like wagon train or one of the lakes around Lincoln. When they restock that, would you be able to do like a fish count to see what kind of percentage of fish come back? Like what kind of a hatch they would expect in a lake like that?
yeah, so I'm not 100% sure what they were going for at Wagon Train, whether it was a low dose rotenone. I believe they were going for a full kill on all
kill.
fish species.
Yeah, full kill.
Yeah, so kind of sort of in that retrospect, basically what's going to go on there is hopefully they can get a complete 100% full kill. The odds of that, obviously, just nature is nature. Something usually can find a little bit of fresh patch of water that might still have some oxygen that's not contaminated with rotenone. So to get every last fish is sort of, pushing it, but hopefully their target species are pretty much reduced to zero. And so what we'll then do is coming off of that is once that water goes back to being uncontaminated, or the rotenone has sort of died down, has broken down and is no longer a factor, what's going to go on there usually is you'll go in. It kind of depends on what they see. If they don't believe they've got a full kill, a lot of times we'll stock an adult predator first. So something like adult largemouth bass or adult walleye is another good one. Something that's going to eat anything basically that didn't get killed, or that might be small, that's still kind of kicking around. But if they believe they did get a full kill, we're going to come in and start with, in Wagon Train's case, I'm assuming going to be bluegill. So you'll start with your food source, something that propagates itself really quickly, something that we don't have to necessarily spawn at a hatchery. They can kind of do it themselves. So you'll see that usually come in first. And then beyond that, it's just going to be sort of a requested number per acre that we'll stock in. And then those lakes will be surveyed by our fisheries management, then usually pretty heavily right after a renovation yearly, to give us an idea of what we have for fish population actually in the lake. And then of course adjust the stockings kind of accordingly to that population estimate. But as far as, seeing what fish are going to come back, we hope none. That's kind of the end game. It's a little bit unrealistic to expect, but that's what we hope. We hope none. We don't want to see any come back. We want to go ahead and try to get on top and know exactly what we're putting in, and have a good idea of those populations, right after it's killed. So.
Oh, we got one more.
Marcus.
Go ahead.
Marcus, this is Ken Rytan, Arliss's husband.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on occasion I've seen walleye for sale in Lincoln grocery stores. do you have any idea where those walleyes come from?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, they're a pretty high commodity when it comes to a food fish. None of those fish are coming out of the state of Nebraska. A lot of them come from commercial fisheries in Minnesota, Wisconsin, sort of that area. I don't believe North Dakota has a commercial fishery. And then even honestly, Canada, a lot of them in your big grocery stores come out of the fish food market out of Canada. But I'm assuming, if you see it at like a Hy-Vee or something, it's probably coming from Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Canada.
Yeah, none of them from Nebraska.
Nope, none of those are coming from Nebraska.
Okay.
There's a restaurant in Plattsmouth too that has walleye once in a while, and I was wondering about that too, but I never think to ask them.
Sure, yeah. And there again, it kind of depends. I mean, there is certain cases to where if you were running a small enough restaurant, you probably could serve some fish, that you caught. But what we run into, like in the state of Nebraska, is you really can't sell your wild game. So, you can't go out and catch you a whole bunch of walleyes and then sell them for $30 a pound. So
Not like the good old days.
yeah, not like the good old days. So yeah, more than likely they're coming from a place with a food fish market.
Right.
Sort of Minnesota, Wisconsin is a big one. So
Do you have any trouble with snapping turtles and weird
not
things?
usually early, a little bit in our pike spawn. We'll see them in some of those shallower lakes. You'll see a few, but not usually early. Later on, yeah, we have a few that make it around. So
I have a question. If you were designing an area to produce food for the fish and the walleyes in the lake, what would it look like? Would it be a big weed patch, cattail marsh, farmland? What kind of a area would it produce the best food, and how big should it be per acres of lake?
sure. The how big it should be part is a little tough. But basically, something you're looking for is going to have multiple depth changes. So a big shallow flat, that would drop off maybe to sort of a 15, 16 foot pool, big riprap on the bank, something like that. Maybe some submerged vegetation up on that shallow flat. That's something that's going to produce a lot of bugs, attract a lot of bait fish. That's sort of what you would envision as being the perfect walleye habitat. Lots of depth contour changes, lots of habitat types, whether it be some submerged vegetation up on that shallow flat, whether it be some big rocky riprap, whether it be big deep water they can sit over. That's sort of the walleye heaven right there. If you can give them everything, which right? That's kind of funny. They're a species that really like it all. You can look at sort of like we talked to here, Merritt Reservoir. Merritt is what you would pull up and look at. I mean, it looks like just a huge sandhills lake, which it is. But in the aspect of there's tons of shallow smartweed and cattails and stuff that maybe if you were a bass fisherman, you would kind of really grin and smile and think, oh yeah, this is the stuff. But our walleyes up there love it. And the reason for that being is, they're kind of an apex predator up there between them and muskie. And those aquatic vegetation, grows a lot of bugs, and the smaller fish really love to eat on those bugs, and the walleyes really love to eat on those smaller fish. So it's just kind of an all around, they kind of like it all. They want it all. Then you get out to something like a Lake McConaughy, obviously, and you have big deep water with huge ledges and trees and big rock structures. So yeah, if I were to design it, I would put everything you would think would be great to fish is probably what a walleye likes.
Well, Marcus, it's 20 after, so we're going to thank you for giving a great program tonight, answering everybody's questions. And so if anyone has any questions, I'm sure you can get a hold of Marcus out at the North Platte Hatchery.
I have one quick question. Do you
Okay,
guys
Glenn,
eat,
yeah, quick
do
one.
you guys eat a lot of fresh fish while you're out there working?
Not usually while we're working, but yeah, we like to eat them.
Okay, well, thank you again, Marcus, and we really appreciate it. And take care.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you guys
thank
for
you.
having me.
Great job, Marcus. Good presentation.
And Chase, thanks for your help on answering some questions. And take care, guys. We'll see you.
Take care. See ya.
Yep. Thanks. You guys too.
I think he's cute.
Yes, it looks good.
Chase.